In the programme we were talking to Dr. Mark Porter and ME researcher and sufferer Jayne Colby about the effects of the debilitating condition known as ME.
Well, our next guest knows the pain and heartache that ME can cause firsthand. Last summer, Esther Ransen revealed that her daughter Emily has been a sufferer since recovering from glandular fever in 1992. And today she joins us live from London to talk about what it's like living with ME in the family. Good morning, Esther.
Good morning.
Hi, Esther.
What happened to Emily?
Well, she had glandular fever 1991.
And how old was she?
Yes, it sounds as if she was that old. I didn't mean that. In 1991. Let me see. She was about 14, 15. And from time to time over the next 2 or 3 years, she had relapses, or at least that's what I thought they were. And then last January, a year ago, she developed what was clearly a chronic condition. I didn't know quite what it was, but I remember walking upstairs behind her and realizing that she almost couldn't walk at all, that she was in a lot of pain. She'd been having really severe headaches. She was sort of living on painkillers. And I thought, this is not a relapse of glandular fever, this is something else. And of course all the worst thoughts went through my head, like, was it a brain tumour, or was it something, cancer-related? And I went to the doctor and he said, I think it's ME, and he referred her to a consultant who put her through a barrage of tests, all the brain scans and everything else, and did confirm the diagnosis of ME.
And you were a cynic, weren't you, beforehand?
Well, I wasn't entirely cynical. I knew it was an illness, but I didn't know how far it was psychosomatic, how far it was, something to do with depression or people being school-phobic. And I must say to you, Anne and Nick, I've just today read a letter which came in as a result of the articles I wrote about this from a mum in Nottingham who's had just the same sort of experience with her daughter, who's 15, except that her daughter was told she was school-phobic. The mum was accused of making her daughter anorexic. She was accused of creating this illness. She was made to do aerobics and exercising, and now this girl has ended up in a wheelchair.
Well, I want to point out that picture behind you, on the desk behind you, that's Emily.
This is Emily.
Yeah.
Bless her heart.
How is she now?
Well, it's one of those awful illnesses. If you'd asked me on Sunday how she is, I would have said she'd had a most wonderful Saturday and we'd all been very up and enjoyed ourselves together as a family. But yesterday, she was exhausted and tearful and in a lot of pain. So the answer is, it's such a difficult illness to predict that from one day to the next, you can never quite tell.
And what do you do about it day to day then? I mean, how do you treat it?
She's on a sort of management regime, which means that every day she has to rest about half an hour every hour and a half, which means that she is never allowed to exhaust herself. But it also means that she can put activity into her day. See, she did brilliantly in GCSEs, and now she's had to leave school. So she's doing a little bit of French conversation. I want to get her to do a little bit of politics and English, which are her great pleasures, but at the same time she mustn't exhaust herself. And you just hope, I just hope, she's not in a wheelchair now, and she was in the summer. So I hope that I can see a slight improvement. Average duration, they say 4 years. So who knows? Some people have written to me have had it for 17, 18 years. Some people get over it in a year.
How's it affecting the family, Esther?
Beastly. It's awful for all of us. Because we're also concerned for her. But obviously she's got sister and brother who have to live their own lives, very active lives, going out a lot, which of course makes Emily feel that she's in a prison at home. She has a lot of our company and very little company from her own contemporaries, and at 18 this is very hard. Actually, it's her birthday on Thursday.
Oh, well, we'll say happy birthday to Emily now, just in case she's watching. What do you feel about, you say you're convinced now that ME really is an illness, really is a problem, we just don't know very much about it. Do you ever have moments of doubt yourself, though, about whether it's something that, I don't know, you're a very high-achieving family, all of you. She's got her mum to live up to as well. Do you ever worry about any of the outside causes?
Yes, of course I do. I wonder whether we've created a stressful background which has caused this, whatever it is, to take root. But being me, I went to a World Congress on ME in Brussels last autumn, and I learned enough about it. They think it's either a virus that is still present in Emily, or it's a hit-and-run virus related to the glandular fever she suffered in her case, that you get rid of the virus, but it still has this effect on your hypothalamus, which is a bit of the brain which controls a lot of things, including mood and temperature control and energy and fatigue. So it's an illness. There's no question it's an illness. And I think it's just a question of time before we find a cure.
What do you want to achieve by this sort of campaign this year?
Well, I don't want stories like this to carry on. I don't want children and their families to be made to feel guilty, to be blamed for an illness, for someone not to be diagnosed, to be called school-phobic, to be forced to do all kinds of things. I've known paralyzed children thrown into swimming pools to see if that miraculously will cure them. It's like the old days of witchcraft. I want people to recognize ME is a serious illness and it needs taking very seriously, and that children suffer just as much as adults.
Esther, it's nice to talk to you today, and give her our love, won't you?
Thank you, I will.
Thank you
so much.
Well, we're going to stay on the subject because it's time now to take some of your calls on ME, and with us in the studio again are Dr. Mark Porter and Jayne Colby, and first on the line is Karen. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
Hello, what would you like to
Good
tell us?
morning. Well, what I'd really like to know is whether the truth is that it's a post-viral virus. Is that right?
I think the term ME is actually the favoured term at the moment, but it is exactly or very similar to something called post-viral syndrome. Chronic fatigue syndrome is another name, but don't worry too much about the names.
Well, the other thing I'd like to know is, can it be diagnosed in the bloodstream a few years after it's suspected that it was first caught?
But I'll tell you what happens in most cases. Typically, the typical patient with ME comes along to see their doctor after they've had some sort of viral illness, whether it be the flu, whether it be vomiting and diarrhea, or in case of Emily, glandular fever. They then come in with symptoms that have persisted, sometimes for many, many months, that come and go. And they then come to me and say, is it ME? I want a blood test to have it done. No such thing as a blood test for ME, I'm afraid. We diagnose on symptoms, and there are sort of three main groups of symptoms that must be fulfilled in all cases, and these must really last about 3 months. Fatigue, that's tiredness, after exercise, or even mental exertion, that normally you would have coped with it very easily before, associated with sort of muscle aches, and even actually twitching muscles as well.
Well, can I
And hang on, let me just finish.
Yeah.
And also, a whole range of other symptoms that come under this sort of neuropsychiatric thing, where they things like the lack of sleep, emotional lability, which is a medical term for when 1 minute you're up, next minute you're way down, you're very tearful. All those sorts of symptoms. We look for that, number one. Number two, we then try and exclude all the diseases like lymphoma, leukemia, serious conditions that can mimic things like ME. If we can't find any of those and the symptoms fit, then we consider the diagnosis of ME. And personally, I then refer to a specialist to have it doubly confirmed, because my worry is that we're missing something very nasty that would benefit from early treatment, such as a strange form of cancer. So there is no blood test. No, I'm afraid not. It's a long, drawn-out affair.
Well, I must admit, that doesn't help me much. I went to the doctor. I mean, I've had it 4 years plus.
Yeah.
I'm getting relapses, but I am getting better.
Right.
But I went to the doctor. I had 3 blood tests in 1 year, and apparently that it came back with a virus in the bloodstream, and that's all I was told. And as a last resort, she said, "Do you really want to know?"
Right.
And I thought, well, that is ridiculous, because if it is ME, then really what I need to be doing is resting instead of fighting it.
Your key is to find out more about the condition yourself and to take responsibility for the condition yourself. The doctor's job is to make sure you haven't actually got anything other than ME and to tell you it is ME and to support you. Your next step is to find out all about it yourself.
Karen,
What
thanks for your
specialist
call.
do you
I hope that
refer
helps.
people to?
In each area, it varies depending on what doctor in that area. It could be a neurologist, it could be a physician. In our area, it's a physician, and it depends very much on which consultant has a special interest in your area.
Laura is next from Hertfordshire. Good morning, Laura.
Hi.
Good morning. Fire away.
I'm 15 and I was diagnosed with ME in November, and basically I'm on part-time school. I'm supposed to be taking my GCSEs in the summer, and my friends are great, but other kids don't seem to understand. I'm getting a lot of hassle about being on so little school. I couldn't take my mocks. I took 4 exams and that was it.
You want to take those GCSEs though, do you?
Yes.
So you could do with some advice on how to cope with the situation.
Well, Jayne is here and she suffers from ME and she's a former head teacher, so I think she's absolutely suited to give you a bit of advice.
Yes.